Madison Taylor had always been different from other 22-year-old girls. While her friends were posting selfies and sharing their daily coffee runs, Madison was creating elaborate pranks and challenges that made people stop scrolling and watch. Her TikTok account, Madison Mischief, had grown from 0 to 3 million followers in just 18 months, and she had become addicted to the rush of viral content. The young woman from Ohio had never planned to become famous. She started making videos during her college years, just posting silly dances and lip-sync videos like everyone else. But Madison quickly realized that ordinary content wasn't going to cut it in the crowded world of social media. She needed something bigger, something that would make people talk. Her breakthrough came when she pranked a street performer in New York City. The video showed Madison pretending to trip and fall into the performer's hat, scattering coins everywhere. The performer's shocked reaction and Madison's fake apologies created the perfect storm of entertainment and controversy. The video exploded overnight, gaining 5 million views and turning Madison into an internet sensation. From that moment, Madison's life changed completely. Brand deals started pouring in, and she was invited to influencer events and parties. She moved from her small apartment in Columbus to a trendy loft in Los Angeles, complete with ring lights and professional camera equipment. Her parents, who had initially worried about her dropping out of college to pursue social media, suddenly became her biggest supporters when the money started flowing. But success came with pressure. Madison found herself constantly searching for the next big idea, the next video that would break the internet. She hired a team of editors and assistants, and together they brainstormed increasingly elaborate schemes. They pranked delivery drivers, surprised random people on the street, and even staged fake emergencies to capture people's genuine reactions. The comments section became Madison's drug. Thousands of people would write things like, "This is hilarious," and Madison never fails to entertain. But alongside the praise came criticism. Many accused her of taking things too far, of being disrespectful and inconsiderate. Madison learned to ignore these voices, focusing instead on the growing numbers in her bank account and follower count. As her popularity grew, Madison began traveling internationally, always with her camera crew in tow. She pranked tourists at the Eiffel Tower, surprised locals in Tokyo markets, and created chaos at beaches in Australia. Each location provided new opportunities for content, and Madison's appetite for attention seemed insatiable. The idea for her London trip came during a particularly stressful week. Her latest video had underperformed, gaining only 2 million views instead of her usual 5 to 10 million. Her manager Derek, a slick 30-something man who managed several other influencers, suggested they needed something really special to regain momentum. "We need to go bigger," Derek said during their weekly strategy meeting. "Maybe it's time for an international incident, something that will get picked up by news outlets, not just social media." Madison's eyes lit up. She had always been fascinated by British culture, particularly the royal family and their traditions. The idea of creating content at one of London's famous landmarks appealed to her sense of drama. After some research, they settled on Buckingham Palace and the iconic royal guards as their target. The plan seemed simple enough. Madison would approach one of the famously stoic guards and try to get a reaction. She had heard stories about tourists attempting to make the guards laugh or move, usually unsuccessfully, but Madison was confident that her particular brand of persistence and creativity could break through their professional composure. Derek booked flights to London for Madison and her small crew, which included her cameraman Jake and her assistant Riley. They spent days researching the guards' routines, the best times to visit, and the legal boundaries they needed to stay within. Madison didn't want to get arrested, but she also knew that a little controversy never hurt anyone's career. The night before their planned filming, Madison lay in her hotel room scrolling through comments on her recent videos. The usual mix of adoration and criticism filled her phone screen, but one comment stood out. "These guards are trained soldiers, not entertainment. Show some respect." For a moment, Madison felt a flicker of doubt. She had never really considered the guards as real people with feelings and responsibilities. To her, they were props in the grand theater of London tourism, standing perfectly still in their red uniforms and tall black hats. The idea that they might be actual human beings with dignity and purpose had never occurred to her, but the doubt passed quickly. Madison had built her career on pushing boundaries and creating moments that people couldn't look away from. She told herself that she wasn't going to hurt anyone, Just have a little fun. Besides, millions of people would enjoy the content, and that had to count for something. As she drifted off to sleep, Madison pictured the video in her mind. She imagined herself approaching the guard with her characteristic confidence, trying various tactics to get a response. She envisioned the guard's eventual crack in composure, maybe a smile or a laugh, and the incredible content that would result. The video would go viral instantly, cementing her reputation as someone who could make anyone break character. What Madison didn't know was that tomorrow would teach her lessons about respect, dignity, and the difference between entertainment and exploitation. She had no idea that her encounter with a royal guard would change not just her content strategy, but her entire perspective on what it meant to be a creator with influence. The stage was set for a confrontation that would become legendary on social media, but not in the way Madison expected. Her 3 million followers were about to witness their favorite creator learn that some people cannot be turned into content, and some boundaries should never be crossed. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace as Madison and her crew arrived at their destination. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a bright pink crop top and matching shorts that would stand out against the formal backdrop of the palace. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves and her makeup was flawless, designed to look natural on camera while still being Instagram ready. Jake, her cameraman, was already scanning the area for the best angles. He was a quiet 25-year-old from Michigan who had dropped out of film school to work for Madison full-time. While he sometimes questioned the ethics of their content, the steady paycheck and the excitement of viral videos kept him motivated. Riley, Madison's assistant, was busy checking the equipment and managing the small crowd that had started gathering around them. Madison's presence was hard to ignore. Even before she started filming, tourists began recognizing her from her videos. Young people pulled out their phones, whispering excitedly to their friends. Some approached asking for selfies, which Madison gladly provided, knowing that user-generated content featuring her would only help spread awareness of whatever she was about to create. The royal guards stood at their posts with perfect posture, their red tunics and distinctive bearskin caps making them appear almost like statues. Madison observed them from a distance, studying their positioning and trying to determine which guard would make the best target for her video. She had done her research and knew that these weren't just ceremonial figures. They were active-duty soldiers from some of Britain's most prestigious regiments. But to Madison, this knowledge was just background information. What mattered to her was their reputation for remaining completely motionless and silent, regardless of what tourists did around them. This legendary stoicism was exactly what she planned to challenge. Madison approached the first guard, a tall young man who couldn't have been much older than herself. She started with her usual tactic, positioning herself directly in front of him and waving enthusiastically. The guard's eyes remained fixed straight ahead, showing no acknowledgement of her presence whatsoever. "Hi there," Madison said loudly, making sure her voice would be picked up clearly by the microphone. "I'm Madison and I'm here from America. Can you smile for my video?" The guard remained motionless. Madison wasn't discouraged. She had expected this initial resistance. She began her second phase, which involved more elaborate gestures. She jumped up and down, waved her arms wildly, and even did a little dance routine that had gone viral in one of her previous videos. The gathering crowd was eating it up. Tourists stopped to watch, many pulling out their own phones to record Madison's antics. Some laughed at her performance, while others seemed uncomfortable with her behavior. Riley noticed a few people shaking their heads in disapproval. But Madison was too focused on her performance to pay attention to the mixed reactions. For 20 minutes, Madison continued her routine with the first guard. She tried funny faces, told jokes, asked questions about his personal life, and even pretended to be a long-lost friend. The guard never moved, never blinked, never showed even the slightest reaction to her increasingly desperate attempts to get his attention. Frustrated but not defeated, Madison moved to the second guard. This one was shorter and appeared to be older, perhaps in his 30s. Madison repeated her performance, this time adding some new elements she had thought of while working on the first guard. She sang popular TikTok songs, did impression of famous celebrities, and even tried speaking in a fake British accent. The crowd around them had grown significantly. Madison's antics were creating a small spectacle, and palace security was beginning to take notice. Riley spotted several officers in plain clothes positioning themselves around the area, clearly monitoring the situation. She tried to catch Madison's attention to warn her, but Madison was too absorbed in her performance to notice her assistant's signals. Jake continued filming, though he was starting to feel uncomfortable about the whole situation. Through his camera lens, he could see details that Madison was missing. The guards weren't just ignoring her. They were actively working to maintain their composure despite what was clearly becoming an increasingly difficult situation. He could see the tension in their faces, the slight tightening around their eyes that suggested they were aware of everything happening, but were professionally committed to not reacting. Madison's tactics became more aggressive as her frustration grew. She had never encountered anyone who could resist her charisma and persistence for so long. Usually people either loved her immediately or got annoyed enough to give her the reaction she needed. But these guards were different. They seemed to exist in a world where Madison's usual rules didn't apply. She began making physical gestures closer to the guards, though she was careful not to actually touch them. She had been warned that physical contact could result in immediate arrest. Instead, she waved her hands inches from their faces, pretended to style their hair without touching them, and even mimicked their posture while standing right next to them. The crowd's reaction was becoming more polarized. Younger tourists seemed to find Madison's performance entertaining, laughing and encouraging her to continue. But older visitors and many British locals were clearly disapproving. Some began making comments about American tourists and their lack of respect for British traditions. One elderly British woman approached Riley and said firmly, "This is disgraceful. These are serving soldiers, not entertainment for your little videos." Riley tried to explain that Madison wasn't hurting anyone and was just having fun, but the woman walked away shaking her head in disgust. Similar confrontations were happening throughout the crowd, with people taking sides either for or against Madison's performance. After an hour of attempting to get reactions from various guards, Madison was starting to feel desperate. Her usual confidence was beginning to crack, replaced by a determination that bordered on obsession. She had never failed so completely to get the content she needed, and the pressure of her watching crew and the gathered crowd was making her feel like she had to succeed no matter what. It was then that she noticed him, a guard who stood apart from the others, positioned at a slightly different post. Even from a distance, something about his presence seemed different. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a bearing that suggested years of military experience. His uniform was immaculate, and his posture was so perfect it seemed almost supernatural. Madison pointed him out to Jake, who adjusted his camera position to capture what would become the most important footage of their trip. As Madison approached this new target, she felt a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension. Something about this guard's presence made her feel like she was about to cross a line she had never encountered before. The crowd followed Madison as she walked toward the guard, sensing that something significant was about to happen. The atmosphere had shifted from casual entertainment to something more intense, though Madison was too focused on her goal to fully appreciate the change in mood around her. The guard Madison approached was different from the others in ways that weren't immediately obvious. Sergeant William Hayes had been serving with the Coldstream Guards for 12 years, and his presence commanded respect even when he wasn't speaking. At 34 years old, he had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and had been decorated twice for his service. The bearskin cap and red tunic were ceremonial, but the man wearing them was a seasoned professional soldier. William had been watching Madison's performance with the other guards from his peripheral vision. As a senior non-commissioned officer, he was responsible not only for maintaining his own post but also for the welfare and professionalism of the younger soldiers under his command. He had seen the discomfort in their faces as Madison pushed boundaries, and he had noted the growing tension in the crowd. What Madison didn't understand was that the Royal Guard's silence wasn't just tradition, it was a disciplined response that required immense self-control. These soldiers were trained to remain focused regardless of distractions, whether those distractions came from enemy fire or from attention-seeking tourists. Their composure wasn't robotic. It was the result of years of training and dedication to their duty. As Madison positioned herself in front of William, she immediately sensed that this encounter would be different. Something in his bearing suggested that he was not just another prop for her video. But her confidence, built on months of viral success and millions of followers, made her push forward with even more determination. "Hello there, handsome," Madison began, employing the same tactics that had made her famous. "I bet you've never seen anything like this before." She launched into her most elaborate routine yet, combining elements from all her previous viral videos. She danced, sang, told jokes, and even attempted some of the trending challenges that had made her famous. The crowd around them continued to grow, and Madison fed off their energy, becoming more animated with each passing minute. But William remained absolutely motionless. His eyes stared straight ahead, never wavering, never acknowledging Madison's presence even slightly. What Madison couldn't see was the incredible discipline it took to maintain this composure. William was acutely aware of every movement she made, every word she spoke, and every reaction from the crowd. But his training had taught him to process this information while maintaining his professional demeanor. After 30 minutes of her most energetic performance, Madison was starting to sweat despite the cool London morning. Her usual tactics weren't working, and she could feel the pressure of the cameras and the crowd. She had built her career on being able to break down anyone's defenses, on finding the humanity in every situation and turning it into content. "Come on," Madison said, her voice taking on a slightly pleading tone. "Just one little smile? One tiny reaction? My followers would love it." She began talking about her fame, her follower count, and the opportunities that appearing in her video could provide. Madison genuinely believed that she was offering something valuable, exposure to millions of people and a chance to be part of something that would be watched around the world. "I have 3 million followers," she announced loudly. "This video could make you famous. Don't you want to be part of something bigger than just standing here all day?" The crowd's reaction to this statement was mixed. Some of the younger tourists seemed impressed by Madison's follower count, but others began murmuring disapprovingly. Several British visitors were clearly offended by the implication that serving as a royal guard was somehow less important than social media fame. William heard every word, but his training had prepared him for far more serious distractions than an entitled influencer. He had maintained his position while under mortar fire, had stood guard while exhausted from days without sleep, and had performed his duties in conditions that would break most civilians. A young woman with a camera presented no challenge to his professional discipline, but Madison was just getting started. Frustrated by her complete failure to get any reaction, she began escalating her tactics. She started making up stories about emergencies, claiming to see celebrities in the crowd, and even pretending to faint dramatically right in front of William's post. Each escalation brought more attention from palace security, but also more views for her live stream, which Riley had started broadcasting to Madison's social media accounts. Comments were pouring in from around the world, with viewers divided between finding Madison's persistence entertaining and being appalled by her behavior. "Yes, his queen. Break him," wrote one commenter. "This is so disrespectful." "These are real soldiers," wrote another. "Why won't he just smile?" "It's not that serious," added a third. Madison could see the comments flowing across Riley's phone screen, and the mixed reactions only fueled her determination. She had never backed down from a challenge, and she wasn't about to start now. In her mind, this had become bigger than just content creation. It was a battle of wills, and she was determined to win. She began telling William about her life, sharing personal stories in an attempt to create a human connection. She talked about growing up in Ohio, her dreams of becoming famous, and the hard work that had gone into building her social media empire. Madison genuinely believed that if she could just find the right words, she could reach the person inside the uniform. "I know you're a real person in there," she said, her voice becoming more intense. "You have feelings, dreams, maybe a family. Why are you pretending to be a robot? This isn't who you really are." What Madison didn't understand was that William's composure wasn't about pretending to be anything. It was about honoring a tradition that stretched back centuries, about maintaining the dignity of his position, and about respect for the institution he represented. His silence wasn't robotic, it was profoundly human, representing values like duty, discipline, and selfless service that Madison had never encountered in her world of instant gratification and constant attention-seeking. The crowd around them had grown to over 100 people, creating a significant disruption to the normal tourist flow around the palace. Palace security officers were positioning themselves more obviously, and it was clear that the situation was approaching some kind of resolution. Madison could sense the growing tension, but instead of backing down, she decided to make one final push. She had one last tactic that she had never used before, something that she was sure would finally break through William's professional composure and give her the viral moment she desperately needed. As she prepared for her final attempt, Madison had no idea that she was about to cross a line that would change everything, not just for her video, but for her entire understanding of respect, dignity, and what it truly meant to serve something greater than oneself. Madison's final tactic was something she had been saving as a last resort. She had used it only once before, during a video that had nearly gotten her banned from several social media platforms before it went viral and saved her reputation. The strategy involved creating what appeared to be a genuine emotional moment, something so personal and vulnerable that even the most stoic person would feel compelled to respond. Taking a deep breath, Madison positioned herself directly in William's line of sight and began what appeared to be a heartfelt confession. Her voice took on a trembling quality as she started speaking about her struggles with fame, her loneliness despite having millions of followers, and her desperate need to connect with real people in an artificial world. "I know this might seem silly to you," Madison said, her eyes beginning to well up with tears that she had learned to produce on command. "But I'm really struggling. Behind all the fame and the followers, I'm just a scared girl from Ohio who doesn't know who she really is anymore." The performance was masterful. Madison had spent months perfecting her ability to appear vulnerable and authentic on camera, knowing that emotional content often performed better than pure comedy. She talked about her parents' divorce, her struggles with anxiety, and her fear that she would never be taken seriously as anything more than a social media personality. Several people in the crowd were visibly moved by Madison's apparent breakdown. Some tourists looked genuinely concerned, and a few even approached Riley to ask if Madison was okay. The comments on the live stream began shifting from criticism to sympathy, with viewers expressing concern for Madison's mental health and well-being, but William remained unmoved. His training had exposed him to genuine human suffering. He had held dying comrades in his arms, had seen the real tears of families torn apart by war, and had witnessed authentic human vulnerability in its rawest forms. What Madison was displaying, despite her skill at manufacturing emotion, was clearly performance rather than genuine distress. More importantly, William understood something that Madison didn't about the nature of respect and boundaries. Even if her emotion had been real, using personal trauma as a tool to manipulate others into breaking their professional commitments was deeply inappropriate. William's silence wasn't cruelty. It was a form of respect for both his duty and for the genuine struggles that Madison was trivializing. As her emotional performance continued without effect, Madison began to feel something she had never experienced before: complete powerlessness. For the first time in her career, she was facing someone who could not be moved, manipulated, or entertained into giving her what she wanted. The realization was both terrifying and infuriating. "Fine," Madison suddenly snapped, her fake vulnerability disappearing instantly and revealing the entitled anger underneath. "I guess you're just too stupid to understand what I'm offering you." The sudden shift from tears to rage was so jarring that even some of her most loyal fans in the comments began expressing concern about her behavior. The crowd around them began murmuring more loudly, with several people starting to voice their disapproval of Madison's conduct. But Madison was beyond caring about public opinion. She had invested too much time and energy into this video to walk away empty-handed. In her mind, this guard was deliberately trying to humiliate her, to make her look foolish in front of her followers and the growing crowd of tourists. She began hurling insults at William, calling him names and questioning his intelligence, his masculinity, and his worth as a human being. The words were cruel and personal, designed to cut deep and provoke an emotional response. Madison had learned that anger often worked when other emotions failed. "You're nothing," she shouted, her face red with frustration. "You're just a toy soldier playing dress-up. I'm offering to make you famous, and you're too pathetic to even acknowledge me." Throughout this verbal assault, William remained perfectly composed. His breathing never changed, his posture never shifted, and his expression never altered. But what Madison couldn't see was the effect her words were having on the other guards and the crowd around them. The younger soldiers who had been watching from their own posts, were struggling to maintain their own composure. Hearing their sergeant being verbally abused by an entitled tourist was testing their professional discipline in ways that enemy fire never had. Several looked as though they wanted to abandon their posts to defend their fellow soldier. The crowd's mood had shifted dramatically. What had started as entertainment had become uncomfortable to watch. British tourists were particularly offended by Madison's behavior, seeing it as a direct insult to their military and their country. Even some of Madison's own fans were beginning to comment that she had gone too far. Palace security officers began moving closer, their intentions becoming clear. The situation had escalated beyond a simple tourist disruption and was approaching the level of harassment that required intervention. But before they could act, something unexpected happened. William moved. It wasn't a break in his composure, it was a deliberate, controlled action that demonstrated the difference between losing discipline and choosing to act. William turned his head slowly and looked directly at Madison for the first time. His eyes met hers with an intensity that immediately silenced her mid-sentence. The crowd fell completely silent. After nearly 2 hours of absolute stillness, the guard's movement was electrifying. Everyone present understood that something significant was about to happen, though no one could predict what form it would take. When William spoke, his voice carried the authority of his years of military service and the weight of the institution he represented. It wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for everyone in the immediate area to hear, and Jake's camera captured every word perfectly. "Miss," William said, his tone professional but unmistakably firm, "I am a serving soldier in Her Majesty's army. I have sworn an oath to serve my queen and my country with dignity and honor. I stand here not as entertainment for your camera, but as a guardian of traditions that are older and more important than your social media account." Madison's mouth fell open in shock. After 2 hours of complete silence, the guard was actually speaking to her. But his words weren't what she had expected or wanted to hear. William continued, his gaze never wavering from Madison's face. "You have mistaken my discipline for weakness, my silence for stupidity, and my duty for subservience. You are wrong on all counts." The crowd was hanging on every word. This was clearly a rare occurrence. Royal guards were famous for their silence, and hearing one speak while on duty was unprecedented for most of the tourists present. "I do not need your fame," William said, his voice carrying just a hint of the steel that had made him an effective leader in combat. "I do not require your approval, and I certainly do not exist for your entertainment." Madison tried to interrupt to regain control of the situation, but William raised his hand slightly, a gesture so small that it was barely noticeable, but so authoritative that it immediately silenced her. "You have spent the last 2 hours demonstrating a complete lack of respect for the uniform I wear, the institution I represent, and the people around you who have tried to enjoy their visit to this historic site." William continued, "Your behavior has been selfish, thoughtless, and deeply inappropriate." The words hit Madison like a physical blow. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such quiet authority and devastating accuracy. She felt herself shrinking under William's steady gaze, her usual confidence crumbling completely. William's words continued to fill the silent courtyard, each sentence delivered with the precision of a military briefing and the moral authority of someone who had genuinely served others. Madison found herself unable to look away from his steady gaze, feeling smaller with each passing moment. "You speak of fame as though it gives you the right to treat others as props in your performance," William said, his voice never rising but somehow becoming more powerful. "You measure worth in followers and views, but you demonstrate no understanding of actual value, the value of service, of sacrifice, of standing for something greater than yourself." The crowd around them had grown to nearly 200 people, but the silence was so complete that even those at the back could hear every word clearly. Madison's live stream was breaking records, but not in the way she had intended. Comments were flooding in from viewers around the world, most expressing support for the guard and criticism of Madison's behavior. "Real courage," William continued, "is not about performing for cameras or collecting likes on social media. Real courage is standing your ground when it matters, serving others when no one is watching, and maintaining your principles even when it's difficult or unpopular." Madison tried to find her voice, to mount some kind of defense or counterattack, but nothing came. For someone who made her living through words and performance, she found herself completely speechless. The confident young woman who had approached the guard 2 hours earlier seemed to have disappeared entirely. "I have served 3 tours in Afghanistan," William said, and Madison could hear genuine emotion creeping into his otherwise controlled voice. "I have seen real sacrifice, real heroism, and real tragedy. I have lost friends who died serving something bigger than themselves, who gave their lives so that people like you could live in freedom and safety." The mention of his fallen comrades brought a visible reaction from William, not a break in his composure, but a deepening of his intensity. Madison could see that she had touched something far more serious than she had ever intended. "And you come here," William continued, "to the place where we honor that service and that sacrifice, and you treat it like your personal playground. You reduce centuries of tradition to content for your entertainment platform." Riley, who had been faithfully recording everything on multiple devices, found herself crying. She had worked for Madison for 8 months, helping create dozens of viral videos, but she had never seen her boss so completely outmatched. More than that, she was beginning to understand the implications of what William was saying about their entire approach to content creation. Jake continued filming, but his hands were shaking slightly. Through his camera lens, he could see the profound impact that William's words were having not just on Madison, but on everyone present. This wasn't just a confrontation between a tourist and a guard. It was a fundamental clash between 2 completely different value systems. "You asked earlier why I won't smile for your camera," William said, his tone becoming almost educational. "The answer is simple. This uniform represents something sacred. When I put on this tunic and this bearskin cap, I become part of something that connects me to generations of soldiers who have served before me and who will serve after me." Madison felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. Real tears this time, not the manufactured emotion she had used earlier. She was starting to understand that she hadn't just failed to get a reaction from a stubborn tourist attraction. She had completely misunderstood what she was dealing with. "Every day I stand at this post knowing that I represent not just myself, but every soldier who has ever worn this uniform," William continued. "I carry the honor of my regiment, the trust of my country, and the memory of my fallen comrades. That responsibility is not something I take lightly, and it is not something I will compromise for your entertainment." The crowd began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to sustained applause that echoed across the palace courtyard. It was clear that William's words had resonated with people far beyond just those who were physically present. The live stream comments were overwhelmingly supportive of the guard, with viewers from around the world expressing their admiration for his dignity and his service. Madison found herself applauding too, almost without realizing it. The gesture felt strange and unfamiliar. When was the last time she had genuinely admired someone else's achievement or character? When had she last encountered someone who made her want to be better rather than just more famous? "I want you to understand something," William said, his voice becoming gentler but no less firm. "This isn't about humiliating you or ruining your video. This is about helping you understand that there are things in this world that are more important than content creation, more valuable than viral fame, and more worthy of respect than social media metrics." Madison nodded, unable to speak. She could feel the weight of the hundreds of eyes watching her, but more than that, she could feel the weight of her own actions over the past 2 hours. Every insult she had hurled at William, every boundary she had crossed, every moment of entitled behavior suddenly seemed incredibly small and petty. "You have a platform with millions of followers," William continued. "That's a kind of power that very few people possess. The question is, what will you do with that power? Will you use it to tear down and diminish others? Or will you find ways to build up and inspire?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Madison realized that William wasn't just criticizing her current behavior. He was offering her a choice about who she wanted to be going forward. "I've spent 12 years learning that real strength comes from service, that true honor comes from sacrifice, and that genuine respect must be earned through character rather than demanded through force," William said. "These are lessons that can't be taught in a social media post or learned from viral videos. They come from facing real challenges and choosing to do the right thing even when it's difficult." Madison looked around at the crowd, at her crew, at the palace behind William, and finally back at the guard himself. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about how to turn this moment into content. She was thinking about what it meant and what she could learn from it. "You asked me to smile for your camera," William said, his expression softening slightly for the first time. But I think what you really wanted was acknowledgement, to be seen and validated. I understand that need. Everyone wants to matter, to have their life mean something. Madison felt her throat tightening with emotion as William's words touched something deep inside her that had nothing to do with fame or followers. But meaning doesn't come from how many people watch your videos, William continued. It comes from how you treat the people around you, from what you contribute to the world, and from whether you leave things better than you found them. As William's words sank in, Madison realized that she was experiencing something she hadn't felt in a very long time: genuine respect for another person and genuine shame for her own actions. The confrontation that she had started as a way to create content had become the most important learning experience of her life. The silence that followed William's final words was unlike anything Madison had ever experienced. It wasn't the expectant quiet of an audience waiting for entertainment, but something deeper, a moment of genuine reflection that seemed to touch everyone present. Madison stood there, feeling the full weight of what had just happened, knowing that her life had just changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. When she finally found her voice, it came out as barely more than a whisper. "I'm sorry," she said, the words feeling strange and unfamiliar in her mouth. "I'm really, truly sorry." William nodded slightly, acknowledging her apology without breaking his professional composure. But Madison could see something in his eyes, not victory or satisfaction, but genuine hope that his words had made a difference. The crowd began to disperse slowly, many people approaching Madison with words of encouragement rather than criticism. Several tourists told her that they respected her willingness to listen and learn. One elderly British gentleman shook her hand and said, "That took real courage, young lady. Most people would have just walked away angry." Riley approached Madison with tears still in her eyes. "That was incredible," she said softly. "I've never seen anything like that. He didn't humiliate you, he educated you." Jake had stopped filming, but he kept the cameras rolling as Madison gathered herself and prepared to leave. He knew instinctively that this footage would be different from anything they had ever captured before, not because it was entertaining, but because it was genuinely meaningful. As they walked away from the palace, Madison found herself thinking about everything William had said. For the first time in months, she wasn't planning her next video, or thinking about how to maximize views and engagement. Instead, she was reflecting on what kind of person she wanted to be and what kind of impact she wanted to have on the world. That evening, back in her London hotel room, Madison sat with her laptop open, staring at the footage Jake had captured. The video was unlike anything on her channel, over 2 hours of content that showed her at her worst and then her moment of genuine growth and realization. Derek, her manager, called within an hour of receiving the footage. "This is gold," he said excitedly. "We can edit this down to 10 minutes of the best moments, focus on the drama and the confrontation. This could be your biggest video ever." But Madison found herself shaking her head. "No," she said firmly. "We're not editing this for drama. If we're going to post it, we're posting the whole thing exactly as it happened." Derek was confused. "Madison, nobody watches 2-hour videos on social media. We need to make this punchy, exciting, shareable." "Then maybe we don't post it at all," Madison replied, surprising herself with her own words. "Maybe some things are more important than going viral." After ending the call with Derek, Madison spent the night watching the footage over and over again. She saw herself from the outside for the first time. The entitled behavior, the fake emotions, the complete disrespect for another human being. But she also saw William's response, his dignity in the face of her attacks, and his willingness to teach rather than simply condemn. The next morning, Madison made a decision that would change the trajectory of her career. Instead of posting the confrontation video, she created something entirely different, a simple, honest video where she spoke directly to the camera about what had happened and what she had learned. "I went to London to create content," Madison began, sitting in her hotel room without makeup, without her usual energy, but with more authenticity than she had shown in years. "I thought I could turn a royal guard into entertainment for my followers. Instead, he taught me lessons about respect, service, and what it really means to be a person of character." She talked about her behavior at the palace, owning her mistakes without trying to justify or minimize them. She spoke about William's response and how his words had affected her. Most importantly, she talked about her plans to change, not just her content. but her entire approach to using her platform. "I have 3 million followers," Madison said, echoing William's earlier challenge. "That's a responsibility I haven't been taking seriously. I've been using my influence to tear down boundaries and push people into uncomfortable situations for entertainment. But what if I used it to build people up instead? What if I used it to highlight real heroes like Sergeant Hayes? People who serve others without asking for recognition." The video was unlike anything Madison had ever posted. It was long, serious, and completely without the high-energy entertainment value that had made her famous. She had no idea how her audience would respond. When she posted it, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The video gained 1 million views in the first hour, but the comments were different from anything Madison had ever received. Instead of the usual mix of praise and criticism, her followers were responding with genuine respect and admiration. "This is the most real I've ever seen you," wrote one longtime follower. "Thank you for being honest about your mistakes. This is what real growth looks like," wrote another. "I've been following you for 2 years, and this is the first video that made me actually proud to be your fan," added a third. But the comment that affected Madison most came from an unexpected source, a verified account belonging to the British Army. "Sergeant Hayes has asked us to pass along his appreciation for your willingness to learn and grow. He hopes your platform will continue to inspire positive change." Madison stared at the comment for a long time, feeling emotions she couldn't quite name. William had seen her video. He had responded with the same grace and dignity he had shown at the palace, offering encouragement rather than holding a grudge. Over the following weeks, Madison began transforming her content entirely. Instead of pranks and provocations, she started featuring stories of real heroes: teachers, healthcare workers, veterans, and community volunteers. She used her platform to raise money for military charities and to educate her followers about the sacrifices made by service members and their families. Her follower count actually grew, reaching 4 million within 3 months. But more importantly, the quality of her audience changed. She began receiving messages from parents thanking her for becoming a positive role model, from teachers using her videos to discuss character and respect, and from veterans expressing appreciation for her support of military causes. 6 months after her encounter with William, Madison returned to London. But this time she wasn't carrying cameras or planning pranks. She came as a tourist, quietly and respectfully visiting the palace and observing the guards with genuine appreciation for their service and dedication. As she stood in the same courtyard, where her confrontation with William had taken place, Madison reflected on how much had changed. She was still famous, still successful, and still influential. But now she was using those gifts in service of something larger than herself. She never saw William again during that visit, but she didn't need to. His lesson had become part of who she was, influencing every decision she made about her platform and her life. The TikTok star who had tried to provoke a royal guard had been left speechless by his response. But she had found her voice again, and this time, she was using it to make the world a little better rather than just a little more entertained. The video of her encounter with William never became her most viewed content, but it became her most important. It marked the moment when Madison Taylor transformed from an influencer who demanded attention to one who deserved respect. And in learning to honor others, she had finally found a way to honor herself.